fact that West Ham United could go, not only stay 6th in the Premier League if they win the next game against Sheffield United, but also the fact that we could only be 3 points behind Arsenal is not lost on me. Arsenal would have to lose to Crystal Palace, but you get what I'm saying here. It only takes us to beat Sheffield United, and the season is looking brilliant, and I mean really, really good. You know, coming to the end of January, still in 6th, fantastic. And I think it would not make light of some of our concerns at the moment, but it would maybe put a few of them into perspective. But there still is a worry, right? I think we're right to be worried. Let me get that absolutely straight. What are the concerns? Well, the concerns is that at the same time that Mohamed Kudus has gone off to African Cup of Nations, Jared Bowen's injured, Mikel Antonio's injured, a load of other players are out of form. Lucas Paquetá's injury seems to be getting better or worse with every hourly update, depending on which website you read. It ain't good at the moment. And it made me think a little bit about David Moyes' contractual situation, because I do think that has been very reactive. What we're hearing about David Moyes this season has always been a reaction, so that the perceived points during the campaign when Moyes is believed to have been under pressure, you very much get drip-fed the news that the board will look at his contractual situation at the end of the season. When he does well, you hear that they're about to address it now. It's a little bit too fluid, I think, it's not so much for my liking, but it is a little bit too reactive. It does smack of not a particular plan. There was a point during this season when I was pretty convinced that West Ham, along with Tim Steidten, had probably identified David Moyes' successor, and I believe that to be the case. I was less convinced of it when I started hearing the suggestions, some of them coming from Moyes' mouth himself, that he would probably sign a contract within the next few days or next couple of weeks or whatever it was that he said. Now, the odd thing is, I think we're in one of those situations again now. But I think not so much for results on this occasion. I actually think because of what might happen, the perceived impact it would have on the squad. And when I say perceived, I think it's fair to assume that if you lose your best players and your substitutes are not playing well, results will drop off. But they haven't dropped off yet. That's not happened. I mean, yes, technically we're still in the FA Cup. I know it wasn't great against Bristol City. We're still 6th in the Premier League. But I do wonder if the reaction is at the moment just to be a little bit cautious. As I mentioned in the video that I uploaded earlier on today, as I understood it, and I've not looked, and I stand to be corrected, happy to be corrected, but at the point of me recording the video, David Sullivan had turned up for the under-21s game and David Moyes hadn't. I think things like that probably don't help unless Sullivan was fully aware of it, of course, and David Moyes was out scouting a player, whatever. I don't know, having a deal. I guess there was no football on, so he couldn't possibly have been scouting too many players. There weren't there many matches on, were they? Unless he was watching Chelsea play Middlesbrough, of course. I think the thing is here is there's a reaction possibly coming. Now, for this reason, David Moyes needs to make signings now, because I do think the next few results could impact whether or not he gets offered a new deal this season or not. And this would be at odds with the way David Moyes operates, because Moyes always gives the impression that he is a man with the luxury of time. He's a cigar smoker in that sense. I know technically he's not, but you know what I mean. He's sit back. It's the long-term project. He's been here before, of course. It's not just the impact that his patience, let's call it that, rather than have it an insult. His patience has not only on the club, not only on the fan base, not only on the potential for him signing a new deal, but his patience has maybe on players. That there was certainly a point I felt the final nail in the coffin that made Declan Rice decide he had to leave West Ham and maybe West Ham couldn't match his ambitions was in the January transfer window that preceded the knockout games in the Europa League when we got to the semi-final. He obviously played Lyon, Olympique Lyonnais, played Sevilla. Just before then, there was an opportunity for us to strengthen. And I think had we have done that, bearing in mind in the next transfer window, we did actually go out and spend big money on the likes of Lucas Paquetá. I think had we spent that then, it may well have convinced Declan Rice to stay. I also think it possibly would have been enough for us to go and win that tournament as well. So things could have been very, very different then. You know, the spin... The upshot is then you possibly, if it works, you keep your best player, you win the Europa League, you qualify for the Champions League, Declan Rice signs a new deal. It sounds like fanciful stuff, but we were very close. I don't think there was much in it. We were in the semi-final anyway. Had we have spent maybe the 100 million in that transfer window, then you may well find that 100 million makes a difference in football, right? We didn't do it. My point was there was an opportunity to reinvest, and David Moyes took his time because it was all about the project. No, the project, we know we're not going to wait. And I've heard in the last couple of days that he won't make rash decisions on transfers based on West Ham's injury. I think there's a difference between a rash decision and having a little bit of urgency, which gives you the hurry up. It's almost as if it's this whole binary thing, isn't it? It's almost as if you either take years or you act instantly. There shouldn't be any rash decision for this upcoming transfer window. What one we're in, not upcoming. Moisey and Tim Steiten and whoever else should have spent the last 2 or 3 months identifying players that they wanted to bring in January. September, October, November, December. You do your groundwork, you get to January, you buy the player, you make the bids. It's not that's not rash, that's not hurried. It's only hurried if you get to January and think, oh God, what we got to do? We've got to do something now. Well, I would certainly hope that's not rash, that's just bloody stupid. And if that's the case, what have you lot been doing? I don't believe that to be the case. But I do think if David Moyes gets to a point, and this is how precarious it is, I'm not sure he realises it. Because much like that time when we had the transfer window before the Europa League, we find ourselves there again. Although the names might have changed, the story is the same. Players like Kudus, players like Paquetá will be looking at West Ham and what we do now. They're not going to be oblivious. I would imagine there's a little, I don't know if tinge a little bit of regret in Kudus. Not that he's gone. He wants to go and represent his country. He'll be proud to represent his country. I've no doubt about that. But I do think there would have been a bit of worry. Worry is probably the word I'm looking for. That when he left, he would hope that West Ham wouldn't sail off. He'll be fully aware of all the injury crisis at West Ham now. So all you're looking for, if you're Mohamed Kudus up in the African Cup of Nations, I know he's got a little knock at the moment. If you're Lucas Paquetá with his leg in a cast or whatever the case may be, you're looking then for West Ham to be okay in your absence. That's what you want. You want to see the club do something. And if they don't, it's a little bit of a worry. So let me put this scenario out for you. At the start of the video, I gave the scenario that I think if we beat Sheffield United and stuff like that, it's, you know, things are looking pretty good. Let me give you the opposite scenario just for balance. The opposite scenario is that actually we don't have any of the players, be it Bowen or Kudus, obviously Antonio, Paquetá. We have none of those players available for Sheffield United, and we don't do well against them. I mean the result, not the performance. We could defend all game and Thomas Souček score a header in the 90th minute. We get the 3 points. We're looking pretty in the league. Let's get that right. It might not be nice to watch, but you get my point. But let's say we do terribly. And not only that, some of the substitutes, I won't pick out any names, just look at our bench at the moment, take 3 or 4 out of the bench, put them in the first team, and let's say they have stinkers and Sheffield United beat us or whatever. I think at that point, some of the players start to wonder what's going on. Then the urgency to bring more players in becomes even more pronounced. And I do think at that point, David Moyes' contract, it's not that it comes into question. It's just that whole narrative of, oh, he's getting it signed next week. I'm not so sure he is at that point. Because I think the decision-making on his contract is reactive. I think they stop. I think they have a look. Because I would want to know, if I had given somebody an amount of money, and I know I always use the 3 wide players that we utilise in terms of, or don't utilise in terms of Maxwell Cornet, Said Benrahma and Fornals. They've all got their own individual story, and we cover them in depth, right? But I think if I'd been the one that had written the cheque for the £65 million that they cost, I would want to know why I'd given somebody £65 million for those players, and they couldn't really... I mean, when was the last time any one of them scored a goal? It ain't great, let's put it that way. I'd want to know why that was happening. I think the pressure would be back on Moisey. So I don't think he's got the the amount of time that he thinks he has. As always, I think he looks at this sort of 4-year project, 5-year project. Well, this is it. He's spoken about 4-year project before, 4 or 5 years, but this is it now. It's the end of it. This is the 1 or 2 extra players, and that's it. That's his vision. It's his team. It's his squad. I tell you what, if we start to go on a losing run, we don't reinvest, then I think there's every suspicion that a lot of those players that are doing well for us will want to leave at the end of the season. We'll have the Declan Rice situation again. And if that happens, then what? Do we then hear the same narrative? Oh, I need to build the squad. Again? Another 4 years? Another 5 years? I'm not so sure. I think if it doesn't happen now, and West Ham need to strengthen, and I want us to strengthen, I don't want our season to peter out. I really don't. I want us to buy. I want a midfielder. I want an attacker, and I want a defender. I really, really do. I think this is really important, and that gets done. If we don't, or even we don't do just enough to get us through January and see us through, so some of the players come back. Not only will David Moyes possibly find that in a week or two the board don't sit down with him to talk about renewal on a new contract, he may well find out that they don't do it at the end of the season.